So often I think that we focus too much, and when I say we, I mean white leadership teams focus too much on trying to become experts on the Black experience. And what I mean by that is all of the insights and data is driven to try and understand what are the barriers that hold back Black people from progressing. Do you know what I mean? What are some of the blocks that hold back other minoritized colleagues? You know, what's life like for them? How are we going to get deep into their psyche so we can try and figure out what we need to do differently? Just to be crystal clear, I'm not saying that we don't need to listen, that we don't need to amplify the voices of minoritized colleagues. But what I'm saying is sometimes when you put so much energy and effort into trying to understand somebody else's experience for you to determine what you need to do differently, you're missing one thing. And it's the ability to look at your own experiences. You know, as white people, you cannot be experts in the Black experience, but you can be an expert in your own. So make sure you're balancing thinking about what I can do differently to remove those barriers, but also think, how is it that I don't have those barriers? How is it I don't have to worry about being gaslit? How is it I can get sponsored, or I can find mentors really easily, or I can step into any space and not have anybody question my presence? How is it that my corporate culture, this organisation that I run, works so well for people who look like me? How is it we are still able, no matter how much we've committed to diversity and inclusion, continue to keep perpetuating these outcomes that are favourable for the majority of my white workforce, but so unfavourable for everybody else? Like, those are the questions that I think will elicit far more insight when put in combination with insights from your Black and minoritized colleagues than just purely focusing on their experience alone. Because the unintended consequences overly focusing on trying to be an expert here is that, one, you imply that they're broken and they need fixing. So it's almost like there must be, I'm just looking to see if there's something in terms of the way that they think or the way that they do things that's actually contributing to the problem, rather than structural racism, you know, the systemic barriers that are holding them back. And so you're putting a lens externally when sometimes you need to look internally. One of the best pieces of advice that I say to executive leadership teams as a whole is become an expert on your experience and ask yourself questions as to some of the turning points, the decisions that were made, the support that you got along the way for you to get to your position of power and rank. And what can you learn from that? So it's almost like you're deconstructing a little bit your history. So straight away, if you, just by listening to me saying this, if you're starting to think, hang on a minute, that's a really good point. Like, how did I get here? What were some of those defining moments for me in terms of where I had support, or potentially where things weren't as difficult now that I think about it in comparison to what I now understand about other people's lived experiences? So what can you learn from that? When you're then thinking from that perspective, challenge each other. Think about when you hired, you know, if you're the CEO, think about when you hired your chief financial officer, your chief marketing officer, your chief people officer, particularly if they all look the same as you. Sorry to be crude, but you know what I mean here. And have that discussion that says, how is it that it is so easy to fill a room with people like us? This isn't about proportions and numbers. But how is it we don't have any representation at board level? How is it that we actually don't have any representation at the next level? So what works really well for us that doesn't work well for other people? And I think that's the dynamic that unfortunately is missing. And I think it's not to be self-centered from that point of view. This is about gaining insights, but rather than you treating your black colleagues almost like, you know, individuals under a microscope, you put yourself under a microscope, you challenge each other and you ask those questions. And at the back of your mind, always keep thinking about your current culture. What you mean by culture fit. And forever I will say, why does your culture work so well for people who look like you? And what can you learn from that?